Before starting, if you love scary stories, don't forget to like, share this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support is the driving force that helps horror stories continue to be told. I'm very curious. When and where do you usually watch these stories? Please comment below. Asterisk now. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones and get ready. This is where souls are imprisoned forever. Do not enter. Part 1, the beginning of the story. On a moonlit night, when the space was quiet, I drove into a deserted street, where there was no one but me and the darkness was thick. A strange feeling surrounded me as I drove through deserted roads, without a sound. In the still night air, I felt an endless loneliness, as if everything had stopped. I came here to an area where no one goes anymore. Stepping out of the car, the only streetlight left on the street, with a faint light, was only enough to illuminate the dusty road surface. That's where I found the abandoned hotel I'd heard about, where horror stories and whispers of spirits were held captive. With the camera strapped to my side, I walked past the rusty iron fence and stopped in front of the dim iron gate. Even though I knew that I was just a tourist, a photographer with a passion for abandoned architectural works, my heart still couldn't help but beat faster. A feeling of insecurity suddenly crept into my mind, as if I wasn't the only one here. Part 2, entering silence. The main door of the hotel opened with a slight creak, as if it had not been used for a long time. The weak light from the flashlight in my hand illuminated the dense patches of dust, making the space even more silent and gloomy. The musty smell, a mixture of mold and old chemicals, filled my nose, giving me a headache. My heart felt like it was being squeezed by an inexplicable feeling of discomfort. Entering the main lobby, I realized that all that was left here were old, dusty objects, as if no one had visited this place for decades. The worn-out armchairs, broken lampshades lay on the floor, and the reception desk was no exception, scattered papers forming messy piles, like a hasty departure. The light of my flashlight stopped on a leather-bound notebook, lying open near the edge of the table. Strangely enough, the notebook showed no signs of age. On the contrary, it looked like it had just been used, with the pages slightly disheveled. I can't help but feel that something very strange is lurking here, in the fragments of a vanished past. Strangely enough, I still couldn't stop feeling like I was being watched. Maybe it was the shadows inside this large room, or maybe it was the overwhelming silence, but something kept making me restless. I gingerly walked towards the hallway leading to the rooms. Each step made a soft noise under my feet, as if I was trespassing into a long-forgotten space. Suddenly, I stopped. A small noise, like the rustling of footsteps, came from the end of the hallway. I couldn't be sure what it was, but it was enough to scare me. I could clearly feel the change in the air, as if the atmosphere was thicker, heavier. Part 3, facing the traces. The rustling sound gradually disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind an uncomfortable silence. I continued walking toward the old bedrooms along the hallway. The doors to the room were all closed, but one of them appeared to be unlocked. The door opened gently when I turned the handle. The sound was as soft as the groan of a door that had not been maintained for a long time. I walked in, the bright flashlight scanning the empty room. There was no furniture, no signs of life, just peeling walls and falling pieces of wallpaper. I walked closer to the window, where the dim light from outside shone in. At that moment, the flashlight light stopped on the floor, where there were faint footprints. They don't look like my footprints. They seemed new, as if someone had passed through the place not long before I arrived. But why are there footprints when the hotel has been abandoned for a long time? And why do they lead to a dark corner where I can't see clearly? Anxiety began to grip me. I'm not someone who gets scared easily, but these footprints made me unable to ignore them. They entered a room at the end of the hallway, where the door was ajar. I hesitated a bit, then decided to follow. As I approached, the musty and chemical smell filled my nose again, making me feel nauseous. Part 4, the mysterious room. The door of this room is broken. I can easily push it open. Inside, there was nothing except piles of broken objects and a dirty piece of cloth. But there was something unusual. I couldn't explain the cold feeling that emanated from this room, as if it was not only abandoned but also carried an undeniable presence. I walked in, and suddenly, it felt like someone was watching me from the shadows. The flashlight's light shined into a dark corner, where an old iron cabinet stood. Next to it was a pile of furniture, tires, pieces of wood, and other discarded items. But it was the cabinet that caught my attention. The cabinet door was slightly open, and inside were not old items like I expected, but a metal box. My breathing slowed as I got closer. I couldn't resist my curiosity, even though part of me told me that this was probably something I shouldn't touch. Part 5. The truth gradually reveals. The rustling sounded again, this time from behind me. The feeling of fear is like an electric current running through the body. I turned around, but didn't see anyone. Telling myself that it was just my imagination, I pointed the flashlight at the metal box again. Suddenly, a small noise came from the cupboard, like someone was moving inside. My heartbeat gets stronger. At this point, I was no longer sure of what I was doing. Every reason in me told me to leave, but my curiosity did not let me give up. I opened the box. Faint light shined inside, and I saw strange objects. An antique watch, some old photos, and a worn leather book. But what makes me shiver is the feeling when I touch them. It feels like there is something cold and threatening hidden behind these objects. At that moment, I heard a gentle breathing sound, a breath from behind me. I couldn't resist the feeling that someone was standing right behind me. Part 6. The horror gradually reveals. I stood there, the flashlight shaking in my hand as the light shone on the strange items in the metal box. It felt cold, as if an invisible force was pulling me closer. I don't know why, but I can't leave. The smell of mold and old oil permeated the air, and each breath became heavier. I felt like I was entering a place that didn't belong to me, but I still couldn't escape the attraction of those objects. A soft sound, like footsteps, sounded behind me. This time it wasn't a rustling sound in the dark, but real footsteps, clear and heavy, as if someone was moving near me. I turned around quickly, but still didn't see anyone. All I saw were dark rooms, filled with clouds of dust. At that moment, I realized that the door to the room I had just opened had closed. My mind was spinning, as if something strange was swirling around me. Another noise, this time not from behind me, but from inside the metal box. A sound like metal being pulled from a surface. My hands were stiff, I didn't dare move closer. My eyes remained glued to the box, and I couldn't help but feel that there was something in there waiting for me. Part 7. Dark hole. An inexplicable feeling made me step back, but an invisible force stopped me. Suddenly, the door to the room opened, the creaking sound of the hinges echoing strangely in the thick silence of the hotel. The flashlight's light weakly shone into the empty space in front of me. Everything became blurry, and I felt like I was being sucked into a bottomless pit. The feeling of some presence, however imperceptible, made everything feel heavy. A cold wind blew past, making me shiver. I quickly raised my hand to cover my face, feeling the cold seep deep into my body. I continued to move, as if I had no feeling in my legs, only heavy steps, as if I were stepping through a layer of mud. Suddenly, I heard a light whisper, as fleeting as the wind. That whisper was like no other in the hotel. It is like a warning, or like an untold story, waiting to be told. Part 8. The light at the end of the hallway. I walked further inside, my hands shaking, and the weak light of my flashlight wasn't enough to illuminate the dark room. But as I walked further, I started to notice a dim light from one corner of the room. This light is not like the light of the flashlight I am holding. It had an unusual color, as if coming from another light source, an inexplicable source. As I got closer, the light became stronger. At this moment, I no longer felt scared like before, but instead felt a strange feeling, as if I was getting closer to something too big to understand. I couldn't stop walking. The closer I got, the brighter the light became. Finally, when I set foot in the room where the light came from, I saw a strange object standing in the middle of the room. It was a large mirror, hung on the wall opposite the entrance. But what scared me was not the mirror, but the reflection in it. Part 9. Letters from the Past. The image in the mirror is not me. A man with a blurred face and long hair was standing straight in the mirror. He didn't move, and when I looked longer, I realized that he was not a living person. He fades, like a soul trapped in a mirror. My heart pounded as I stared into the mirror, and I couldn't move. A wave of coldness swept through my body, and I felt like someone was standing right behind me. But when I turned around, there was no one there. The feeling of being watched rose strongly. I didn't dare turn around and look at the mirror again, but it seemed like it had sucked me in, unable to leave. I turned around, and for a moment, the dim light in the room seemed to gradually fade. But before I could leave, I discovered an old letter lying on the bedside table. Part 10. Buried Secrets. The letter was written in red ink. The cursive writing seemed like a warning. Warning that no one can leave after they see the truth. My heart beat harder when I read those words. I feel trapped in this space, where all I see are traces of the past, memories that cannot be erased. But is this true, or just a cruel trick of my mind? I don't know, but one thing I'm sure of, I can't leave. The story continues to develop, with the appearance of strange phenomena and scary details. The secrets in the hotel are gradually revealed, and the truth about the souls trapped there from the past also begins to emerge. The main character's feelings of fear and confusion are further enhanced, as everything around him becomes obscure and unexplainable. Part 11. The Dark Truth. I stood there, the light from my flashlight illuminating the strange letter. The feeling of suffocation made it almost impossible to breathe, and the warnings in the letter felt like an inevitable curse. No one can leave after they see the truth. My heart was pounding, and I felt a cold wave rising in my body, as if someone was standing right behind me. But when I turned around, there was only silence and darkness. I tried to collect the chaotic thoughts in my head, but I couldn't. The feeling of being watched grew stronger and stronger. I walked quickly towards the door, determined to escape this room. But as I touched the doorknob, a loud noise from behind made me turn around. It was the sound of an object falling to the floor. A cold feeling rushed through my body. I couldn't stand still anymore. I turned around, and the large mirror, from one end of the hallway to the other, was faintly reflecting my image. But the strange thing is, in the mirror, I don't see my reflection. Instead, I saw blurred figures, people standing right behind me, unrecognizable faces, staring at me from the darkness. The light suddenly became dim, as if it was fading. Part 12. Strange Transformation. It felt like something invisible was pulling me closer to the mirror. A strange force, like something was sucking me from inside. My eyes couldn't take their eyes off the faint silhouettes in the mirror. Those figures began to move. They were getting closer, and I couldn't move whether I wanted to or not. One of the figures stepped out of the mirror. It was a man with a blurred, unrecognizable face, but I knew that he was not alive. The cold feeling spread through my body again. I felt as if every cell in my body was frozen, unable to move. I turned away, but my legs no longer obeyed my commands. Every step became heavy, as if I were walking in thick mud. A soft sigh sounded from behind me, and I felt a cold chill down my spine. Part 13. The Monster in the Dark. Suddenly, a sharp hiss rang out from somewhere in the darkness. This noise made me tremble from head to toe, as if some animal was screaming in the darkness. The door behind me slammed shut, and I felt the stillness return. But now, this silence is unusual. It carried an invisible menace, as if there was a creature lurking in the darkness, waiting for me to enter. I turned around, and once again, the mirror reflected my image. But this time, it wasn't me in the mirror. A monster with no face, only deep eye sockets and a terrifyingly wide mouth, was waiting. The faint shadows around it kept spinning like a dark cloud. The feeling of disgust and fear made me unable to move. I felt that monster's breath on the back of my neck. Part 14. The door closes. Suddenly, everything around me became dark. All light from the flashlight disappeared. The space around me no longer had any shape. Only emptiness and pitch-black darkness remained. I feel like this space, this hotel, no longer belongs to the real world I know. I raised my hand, looking for a way out, but the door in front of me had disappeared. It was no longer a door leading out, but a cold, dust-covered wall. An eerie silence fell, and I knew I was trapped. The whisper echoed in the air again, this time clearer, closer. The whispers sounded like the voices of trapped souls who once lived here. No one can leave. Their voices rang out like a curse. Please stay with us forever. Part 15, Returning Souls. There was no way back. I turned around, and from the darkness, dozens of faint silhouettes began to appear. The faces have no eyes, no mouth, just silhouettes silently drifting through space. They walked towards me, cold hands reaching out as if to hold me. A hand touched my shoulder, startling me. I turned around, and the image of the man in the mirror appeared before me. His face blurred but filled with hatred. "I can't get out of here," he whispered, and from his mouth no sound came out, just a cold wave that enveloped me. I felt this coldness seeping into my body. Every step I took, every beat of my heart. It was as if I was being watched by invisible beings from all sides. I no longer have the strength to run. I no longer have the strength to escape this hotel. Part 16, Running Away in the Night. Suddenly, I felt a cold air blowing past me, waking me up from the spell of darkness. I quickly turned around, but at that moment, a loud noise rang out behind me, causing me to turn around. A large door at the end of the hallway opened, dim light shining from it like a portal into another world. I don't have enough time to think. My footsteps rushed towards the door. My feet seem to no longer feel the ground. I just know I have to get out of here, away from the figures that are chasing me. But when I stepped foot out of the hotel, that feeling didn't go away. Even though I was out, I felt like those spirits were still watching me. The hotel door closed behind me, but the image in the mirror and those shadows still haunted my mind. At that time, I no longer knew what was real and what was virtual. I only know one thing: I can't go back anymore. Part 17, Strange Signs. The hotel door closed behind me, and I stepped into the darkness of the grounds outside. Even though I escaped that building, the feeling of tension and fear did not disappear. The cold wind constantly blew through the leafless trees, bringing with it a hissing sound like dark sighs. I turned around, looked up at the hotel window, and in that moment, I saw a faint light appear through the upstairs windows. But the strange thing is that light cannot be normal light because all the lights in the hotel are broken. The feeling of restlessness rose in my chest again. I thought I had left, but something inside me couldn't shake the doubt. That light is still present, faint and ghostly. Maybe I'm imagining it, but I can't convince myself. I looked in the mirror of my car, only to discover that my reflection was no longer there. There was only a blurry figure standing behind me, staring at me through the glass window. My steps slackened, and my heart began to beat harder. These strange signs cannot be just imagination. I turned back to look at the hotel one last time, but the light in the upstairs windows had disappeared. Everything was silent and empty again. Part 18, Unforgettable Images. I drove away, but I couldn't seem to escape that obsession. Every time I look in the rearview mirror, I see silhouettes passing by. Every time I stopped to breathe, I felt like someone was standing right behind me, waiting. The figures had no faces, no clear shapes, only faint, inexplicable shadows. I tried to focus on the road, but could not dispel the image of that hotel, of the strange lights and of the strange silhouettes of people following me. It was as if I had carried a part of that hotel with me, like something inescapable, as if I had left a part of my soul in it. A sudden moment, as I passed through an empty street, I saw a figure standing under a streetlight, hands raised high. I stopped, trying to see more clearly, but the figure disappeared immediately, as if it had been sucked into the darkness. Fear began to rise within me again, as if that shadow or that spirit was trying to reach me. Part 19, Whispers from the Past. The next day, when I returned to my house, I started to notice strange things. The photos I took in the hotel that day, which I thought would be just ordinary photos of an abandoned building, turned out to be different when I opened them. These photos are nothing like the photos I took. The hidden corners of the hotel, which the naked eye could not see, now became dimly lit areas, as if there was a presence hidden there. One photo in particular caught my attention. That's a photo of the leather-bound notebook I saw at the reception. Even though I don't remember taking that photo, it was clearly visible in the photo, as if an invisible force had guided the camera to the right place. And what made me feel the most horrifying were the faint lines on the page of the notebook. Not normal writing, but a strange line, like an ancient spell. If you look at it, you will never be free. My feeling right now cannot be expressed in words. What I thought was a normal curiosity has now turned into a real nightmare. Every photo, every line in the notebook, seemed like a prophecy of eternal imprisonment, as if I were trapped in a vortex of souls from which I could not escape. Part 20, The Return of the Soul. That night, while I was trying to sleep, I suddenly woke up by a small noise. I opened my eyes and saw my room was dark. A cold wind blew through the window, carrying with it the musty smell of an abandoned hotel. Suddenly, I felt like someone was standing in my room. I turned my head, and faint figures appeared before my eyes again. Strange images, unrecognizable figures, were standing right behind my bed. The sound of their breathing was gentle, like a wave invading the space. Couldn't move, couldn't say anything. My eyes opened wide, but I couldn't see anything clearly other than those faint silhouettes. One of them approached me. I could feel their cold breath, almost touching my skin. A soft sigh echoed in the air. "You cannot escape this place," a voice whispered, as if right next to me. I jumped up from the bed, but when I looked back, no one was there. The feeling of being watched and the presence of spirits was still there, hanging in the air. Faint images of the hotel and the silhouettes of people haunted me every time I closed my eyes, as if they were trying to find a way into my mind, so that I couldn't get out. Part 21. The door closes forever. The next morning, I decided to go back to the hotel again, even though I knew it was a stupid decision. But part of me wanted to learn the truth, wanted to know if everything I had been through had really been a nightmare. When I arrived, the hotel appeared before my eyes again, just like the first time, as if it was waiting for my return. But this time, I didn't feel like a visitor. I felt like a trapped person, someone who couldn't escape the extension of fate. I entered the gate, and immediately, a strange feeling came over me. The door behind me closed, and I couldn't leave. The soul of the hotel received me, and now, I'm just a part of this place, forever unable to escape. Part 22, Closing Doors. My footsteps pounded down the dark hallway of the hotel. The feeling of being surrounded continued to increase. The space around me felt like it was suffocating. Every wall seemed to be closing in, as if this hotel itself was holding me back, not letting me escape. The door I had just closed behind me had a creak, then fell into dead silence again. I no longer feel like a free person, but a soul trapped in this world. The light from the flashlight flickered weakly. I tried to find calm, but the darkness seemed to swallow all the conscious thoughts in my head. The doors in front of me were locked, and this silence was so heavy that I could feel every breath in the air. I walked towards another room, and when I touched the doorknob, it opened unexpectedly. The door creaked softly, as if it had been waiting for me for a long time. Stepping inside, I felt a cold feeling come over me. There was no sound, just a cold breeze passing by, as if someone was standing right behind me. Part 23, Traces of Time. This room is not like the other rooms. The walls were covered in dust, but the light from the flashlight shone on a strange object, an antique clock lying on the table. This watch is unlike any other watch I have ever seen. It was ancient, with a dial that had faded over time, but the hands were still moving, albeit slowly and out of sync. Even though no one has been here for a long time, the clock still works, as if there is a strange power that keeps it spinning. I couldn't take my eyes off that watch. With each passing second, time seemed to slow down, stretching endlessly, making me feel like I was stuck in an eternal moment. I leaned closer, and for a moment, the clock seemed to make a soft noise, like a small whisper from behind the face. "Don't look at the time." The warning in my heart became clearer, but I couldn't look away. My eyes were drawn to the movements of the clock, as if it was calling me, as if it wanted me to stay. Part 24. The Awakening. Suddenly, the clock stopped. Everything around me seemed to stop moving. The darkness, no longer just an invisible shadow, was now a living entity, surrounding me as if I were trapped in a trap. The feeling of space and time no longer existed, and I began to see faint figures appear around me. The figures began to become clearer, and I realized they were not ordinary people. These souls have deep-set eyes. Their mouths cannot move, but I can feel their pain. They stared at me, unable to speak, unable to call for help. Only a feeling of absolute silence from those eyes. A voice rang out in my head, not ordinary words, but a strange sound, like the sound of tearing through the air. You can't escape. You saw them. You know the truth. I turned around, and I saw myself in the mirror. But it's not me now. I saw a version of myself, but my face had turned gray, as if my soul had been sucked out of my body. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. I was frozen in that moment. Part 25. Feeling of loss. My eyes widened, and I felt a terrifying sense of emptiness. Darkness is covering me, and I can't feel my body anymore. Every sound seemed to be sucked into an endless void. I am in a space between life and death, between past and present, unable to escape, unable to return. Spirits are approaching me. Shadows of the past are passing by me, as if I am no longer a part of this world. The strange sounds rang out again, and I couldn't tell what was real and what was virtual. It feels like everything around me is crumbling into irreparable pieces. And when I looked again at the old clock, I realized something horrifying. Even though I had left the hotel, I was stuck in a time loop, one that would never end. Part 26. The Wheel of No Escape. I turned around, trying to escape the feeling of being imprisoned. But there is no escape. The hotel is still there, and I can't avoid it. It seemed like I was caught in an endless cycle where spirits and hauntings never stopped following me. Every time I thought I had escaped, the hotel appeared before my eyes, just like the first time. The feelings of fear, confusion, and terror made me no longer know what was real. Reality and illusion had merged, and I couldn't escape it. I have become a part of this hotel, of the eternal souls that cannot escape. Part 27. The End. In a sudden moment, I realized that I was no longer human. I no longer feel time. I no longer feel life. I'm just a shadow in this hotel, part of a place that no one can escape. The hotel took me in as part of itself, and I know I will never be able to leave. I turned around, and darkness swallowed me. Part 28. The Rebirth of Feeling. The cold feeling surged through my body as I stood facing the door again. But this time it was not the door of an ordinary hotel room, but an inexplicable door. It was unlike any door I had ever seen. It seemed like there was no exit, no entrance, just part of a space that didn't exist. I put my hand on the doorknob, and a shiver ran down my spine. When I turned the door handle, no sound came out. The door opened gently, without the creaking sound I had heard all the time before. A strange space appeared before me, like another world, but so familiar. In the room before my eyes, everything was blurry. The chairs are old and the desks are covered in dust. But the strange thing is, these objects are moving, as if some invisible force is making them change position. I felt like I was entering another world, a space beyond reality, where time and space no longer applied. I walked in, and as the light from the flashlight shone in, I saw paintings on the wall. These paintings are not ordinary paintings. They have strange drawings, and the images seem to change every time I look at them. Vivid scenes, strange scenes, ghostly figures keep changing constantly. Part 29. Blurred Memoirs. I couldn't take my eyes off the pictures. Each painting seems to contain a mysterious story, a part of a forgotten past. But as I stepped closer, I began to realize that these paintings were more than just works of art. They are memories, memories that I cannot explain, memories that have been lost for a long time. One painting in particular caught my attention. It was a painting of a gloomy road leading into a dark forest. But when I looked closely, I realized that on that road there was a shadow of a person. That figure had a very familiar appearance, as if I had seen them somewhere before. Suddenly, I felt a strong urge to touch the painting. Part of me wanted to learn more about it, and part of me wanted to run away. But I couldn't resist. I reached out to touch the painting, and immediately, a wave of strange feelings came over me. Everything around me started to change. Part 30. The world inside the painting. When I touched the painting, I felt like I was being pulled into it. A cold wind blew past, and I felt the atmosphere change instantly. The painting is no longer a painting, but a door to another world, a forgotten space where anything is possible. I am no longer standing in that room. I found myself in the middle of a dark forest, just like in the picture I had just touched. Everything around me was dark, and the air was so cold that I felt like I couldn't breathe. I saw the figure in the painting still standing there, but now it was no longer a painting. It had become a living entity, moving towards me. The figure stepped closer, and I realized that it was my image, but in a different version. The version of me in the painting, someone I couldn't recognize, with deep-set eyes and a blurred face, as if my soul had been taken over by an invisible force. Part 31. Lost Soul. As the figure approached, I couldn't move. I felt frozen in that moment. Absolute silence filled the air, and then I heard a voice whisper in my head, "You can't escape. You came here, and now you belong here." That voice sounded like a curse, making me unable to understand. I felt like I was losing control, like my soul was being pulled out of my body. The figure stood there, looking at me with empty eyes, and I felt like I was being pulled into a deep hole where there was no way out. Part 32. Steps with no escape. When I looked down at my feet, I saw my footprints on the ground. But they are not my footprints. They were the footprints of another person, footprints leading deep into the forest. I tried to turn back, but I couldn't leave. Every step I took, those footprints followed me, as if they were leading me to a place I couldn't understand. I can't run away. I can't escape this strange world. Everything around me seemed to be spinning, and I no longer knew what was real and what was an illusion. Each footprint led me deeper into the darkness, and I felt myself losing my sanity. Part 33. The Awakening of the Nightmare. Suddenly, a sound rang out, like someone breathing. I turned around and found myself standing in the middle of a large door, leading to an endless dark space. This door is not an ordinary door. It was like an eye opened, staring at me, as if it was waiting for me to enter. With every step I took closer to the door, the space around me became darker. I can't stop. Every step I take seems to pull me into another world, a world that I cannot imagine. And then, as I put my hand on the door, I felt myself being swept up in a whirlwind, a strange, inexplicable whirlwind. Part 34. Final Entrance. It felt like I was falling into an endless abyss, with no way out. But then, right before I was completely engulfed in darkness, I heard a light laugh. That laughter was not the sound of a human being, but the sound of a lost soul. And in that moment, I realized that I was not alone. There are other souls, souls who have passed through this place, standing beside me, waiting. Part 35. The border between reality and illusion. The door closed behind me, and I found myself standing in a strange space. It feels like a room, but not like any room I've ever known. Everything is blurred, as if this space is indefinable. I tried to look around, but every time I looked, the room changed. The walls, the objects, all were blurred and impossible to grasp. I felt like my eyes were locked on small details around me, things that I hadn't noticed before. Small shadows flickered in hidden corners, vague images that I couldn't explain. Part of me wanted to leave this place immediately, but another part urged me to continue searching for answers. I can't differentiate between what is real and what is an illusion. Suddenly, I heard footsteps, a footstep that wasn't mine. It sounded from behind me, almost like the sound of someone walking in the dark. I turned around immediately, but there was only an empty space. I tried to calm myself down, telling myself that it could just be my imagination. But then, I noticed something strange. The ground beneath my feet began to change. Cracks in the floor seemed to open up, as if I were stepping on unstable soil. Part 36. Blurry figures. The footsteps sounded again, this time clearer, and I could feel it approaching. I couldn't see anyone, but it felt like something was coming towards me from the darkness. My eyes were used to the darkness, but I couldn't see anything clearly. Blurred figures kept passing by, like ghosts with no clear shape. Something lurked in the darkness, but every time I looked back, it was gone. The feeling of losing control came back. Every step I took became more difficult. I no longer feel solid under my feet. I started to feel dizzy, as if I was sinking into a bottomless pit. The door I had just passed through seemed to no longer be there, replaced by a rigid, impenetrable wall. Suddenly, a voice rang out in my head, soft but clear. "You can't leave." I turned around in surprise, but there was no one. I couldn't differentiate between that sound and my own thoughts. Am I crazy, or is something actually talking to me? Part 37. The timeline is reversed. Feels like time has begun to turn upside down. Vague memories, unexplored memories, like a book gradually opening in front of me. I found myself standing in front of closed doors, each door carrying a secret, a story that I could not yet understand. Every time I open a door, I find myself back to myself, to past moments, moments that I thought were forgotten. I walked into a room and found myself standing there again, looking at me with empty eyes. My image is not who I am now, but a different version, one that I have never seen before. Memories suddenly rushed back, like a wave that swept me inside. I see events, moments that happened before, but they are not what I experienced. These memories seem to belong to someone else, someone who had lived in this body before me, a lost soul that could never be freed. Part 38. The price of curiosity. I looked at myself, but couldn't recognize who I was anymore. It feels like I've been split into many parts. Each part is a memory, a soul imprisoned in this body. I don't know who I am, and I can't understand why I'm here. The door I just walked through was not a door out, but a door that led me to the darkest parts of my mind. I turned around, and this time it wasn't shadowy figures, but a real soul. A tall figure, with an unrecognizable dark face, stood waiting for me from the darkness. I want to run, but my body cannot move. An invisible force held me back, as if I were locked in this space. That soul approached me. Its eyes were deep, without light, just an endless black hole. A feeling of terror overtook me, as if I were in the presence of a nightmare from which I could not wake. That spirit's voice echoed in my head. "You came here, and now you will never leave." Part 39. It's too late to turn back. Darkness began to cover me. Feels like time is being torn apart again. I can't distinguish between reality, memories, and hallucinations. Everything around me felt like it was melting, as if I was living in a dream that I couldn't wake up from. Suddenly, I no longer felt like I was here. Everything around me dissolved into an unknown space. And then, I realized something scary. I'm not the only one in this space. The other souls were standing around, waiting. They were looking at me, as if I were part of them, part of this place. This space, this hotel, is now more than just a spooky place. It has become a part of me, and I know that I'm too late to turn back. Part 40. The price of discovery. The figures around me are no longer as blurry as before. They were clear, they weren't just standing there looking at me, but were approaching me step by step. I felt the coldness from them, the emptiness in their eyes, as if they had died a long time ago but still existed in this form, forever trapped. I wanted to run, but my body felt like it no longer belonged to me. Everything seems to be melting in this space. I felt like I was being pulled into an endless flow, an inescapable current of existence. These spirits said nothing, just looked at me with menacing eyes, as if they were waiting for me to understand something I couldn't understand. Suddenly, I heard someone's voice, a familiar voice, but vague as if echoing from a distant realm. "You opened that door. Now you will pay the price." I turned around and saw my silhouette standing in front of the big door, like another version of myself. My eyes looked at me with emptiness and sadness, as if I had lost all hope. That voice echoed in my head again, but this time it was a cold laugh. You have opened the door to a world from which you cannot return. Part 41. Facing the truth. The big door in front of me is no longer just a door. It was like a dark hole, a crack in space, into which everything around me was slowly being sucked. Souls, shadows, memories, all disappeared into it, as if they were swallowing everything that belonged to me. I approached, unable to resist the attraction of that door, even though I knew in my heart that if I walked through it, I would never return. A part of me couldn't refuse. I entered this world, and now I cannot escape it. There was no other choice but to enter. I touched the door, and instantly, the space around me disappeared. No more hotels, no more shadows, no more time. I feel like I'm drifting in an endless void, with no end in sight. The murmuring sounds, the blurry images, everything became strange and disjointed. But in that moment, I realized that I was no longer myself. Part 42, the final loss. I can't feel my body anymore. Everything became blurry, and then I couldn't see anything anymore. Not asleep, but a state of floating, as if my soul had been torn from my body. I no longer know where I am. It's all gone. I have lost everything. When I woke up, I found myself no longer in the hotel, no longer in the world I knew. I was in another space, where there was no light, no darkness, only absolute silence. But when I look in the mirror, I don't see myself anymore. I don't recognize myself anymore. I had become a part of this world, a soul trapped in an indefinable space. I turned around, and I saw other souls just like me. They didn't say anything, just looked at me with blank eyes. I knew I couldn't get out. I became a part of the hotel, of this place, of the world that I opened when I decided to enter. Part 43. The door closes forever. And then, the door in front of me closed. Not the door I had walked through, but a new door, a door that I couldn't see, couldn't feel. It has closed forever. I can't go back. I can't go anywhere. I'm left with only the souls around me, and the feeling that I'll be here forever, never free. The world I had opened up had swallowed me whole, and now I was a part of it. The last feeling I got was silence. Absolute silence, no sound, no life, no death. It's just me and the souls trapped in this place, a world from which no one can escape. And then, in the final moment, I realized that I would never go back. I have lost everything. I am a part of this hotel forever. Part 44. Secrets of old movie theaters. The fear increases with every step. As I got closer to the stage, my eyes began to notice strange images against the background of the dark wall. The candles were still burning, even though there was no one around, creating a dim, ghostly light. A strange symbol appeared. It was not any star or artistic drawing I had ever seen. The shape was strange, like a magic eye, something I couldn't explain. The wax flowing from the candles drew strange lines, as if someone had deliberately made a mark. I couldn't take my eyes off them, even though I knew I shouldn't get too close. But part of me pushes, urges me to move closer. Perhaps this was just a coincidence, a manifestation of deterioration over time. But those candles and symbols had a strange attraction, as if there was some force pulling me in. I moved forward, slowly, my footsteps echoing in the silence, adding to the feeling of insecurity. The surrounding air became colder and colder, not just the cold of an old building, but a numbing cold feeling, like someone was standing right behind me. The moment I got close to the icon, a small sound, like the sound of fabric being torn, sounded from behind me. I turned around immediately, but there was only thick darkness. The feeling of being watched came back strongly. I swallowed hard, trying to push away the fear that was twisting in my chest. Part 45. Touching strange feelings. Unable to bear it any longer, I quickly turned around and left the stage area. But when I turned around, the light flashed again. My lights went on, casting eerie shadows across the theater walls. I didn't know if I was seeing right or not, but I could sense a shadowy shape moving along the shadows, a flickering shape that passed me for a moment. I broke out in a cold sweat, and the heavy feeling in the air made it impossible to breathe. At this moment, a strange, eerie feeling came over me, as if this building was coming alive. Its breathing was in harmony with mine, and every step I took felt like I was walking on a layer of sinking soil, like I was stepping into a nightmare with no way out. I stepped back, and a whisper rang out again in the dark space. The blurry shadow now appeared more clearly in my vision. It was like a person crouching low, a faint shadow lurking in the darkness. There was certainly no one in this building but me, but there was a presence that I couldn't explain. Part 46. Feeling out of control. My footsteps echoed in the silence, but I had the feeling I wasn't walking alone. It felt like something was following me. Cold winds blew through the paths, creating strange noises, and the shadows seemed to follow me and not let go. My eyes stared into the darkness ahead, where the light from my flashlight could not reach. Run away, I thought, but I can't. I could feel that presence hovering around me. My head throbbed, and the blurry images in the mirror from before came back to my mind. I couldn't be sure if it was a stress-induced hallucination, but I knew that something was wrong in this dimension. Every step I take now feels like a battle with my own mind. I tried to make sense of what I was experiencing, tried to find a solution to the strange phenomena, but there was no solution. I was trapped in a space I couldn't escape, between reality and illusion, between life and death. Part 47. The Final Transformation. As I approached the door to leave, the light of my flashlight caught something strange. A figure stood right in front of me. I couldn't believe my eyes. It's a person, but it's not human. A pale figure with no discernible face, as if made of fragments of light and shadow. Somehow I knew I couldn't leave. That shadow is waiting for me. And in that moment, I realized that I was not stepping out of the building, but I was entering another space. A space where time no longer worked, and everything was governed by an uncontrollable supernatural force. I felt a strange pull, pulling me closer. I can't escape, I can't run away. And as that shadow approached, I heard a soft, yet powerful voice. You cannot escape. Those words still echoed in my mind, even after I returned to my apartment. Has that shadow really disappeared? Or is it still present somewhere, lurking in dark corners that I cannot see? The quiet in my apartment suddenly became oppressive. Every little sound from the surrounding environment hit my head like strong blows, making me unable to stop thinking about what I had gone through. I tried to convince myself that I had escaped, that I was far away from all those nightmares, but the memories of the cinema, of the flashing lights, of the eerie darkness and the creepy scratching sound could not be erased. Every step I take in this apartment seems to bring with it an invisible figure, a ghost that has never left. I can't stop thinking about the cold chills that ran down my spine when standing under that old roof. The faint light in the night is deeply imprinted in my memory, and every night, I feel like something is still watching, still waiting. The strange sounds, like the scratching of invisible objects, continued. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something lurking somewhere in the shadows of this very house, in dark corners that I couldn't see. So much so that I began to avoid looking into the mirrors in my house, not because I was afraid of my own reflection, but because I was afraid that that shadow would appear again, right behind me. One night, while I was sitting on the sofa, my eyes accidentally glanced at the mirror in the hallway. In just a moment, I realized something strange. My reflection in the mirror did not completely match my real appearance. My shadow in the mirror, in the dim light, seemed like a fainter form, as if there was a part of me that didn't belong to this world. My whole body stiffened. I couldn't breathe. Why did I never leave that place? Could that shadow still stay? I turned around and again saw nothing. The space around me became strangely quiet, as if the world had stopped moving, leaving only me and an invisible shadow that I could not touch or explain. I didn't know if I was facing an endless nightmare or if there was truly something dark that had followed me from that house, from the very moment I walked out the door. The next morning, I decided to leave this apartment and find somewhere strange to start over. But when I opened the door and the sunlight shone on the empty street, I felt like everything around me was just an illusion, a thin veil covering dark secrets that had never been revealed. That feeling wasn't just fear, but a deep worry that I couldn't run away, that something was still following me, somewhere in the darkness, somewhere within myself. As I walked, I couldn't help but look back, afraid that I would see that shadow, that faint image, quietly following me. Something inside me knew that I would never be able to escape that gloomy atmosphere. Not the place I used to live, but the memories that were ingrained in my mind. So I kept walking, even though I knew I might never get out. The shadow still followed me, unseen, inaudible, but I knew it was there. It clings, not letting go, as if I have become a part of it, a part of a horrifying story that I cannot stop. I don't know how far I've gone. I only know that the fear keeps growing with each step. And then, like an irresistible habit, I turned around. A quick look over my shoulder, and I saw it, faint, but it cannot be denied. In the middle of the night, I realized I was back where I started. An endless loop of obsession. A strange feeling crept into every fiber of my being, as if something didn't want me back, but also wouldn't let me leave. Curiosity led me closer to the old warehouse, where I had felt a terrifying presence. But this time, I just stood from afar, observing. The surrounding space was as quiet as paper, a silence so strange that it made me feel like time had stopped here. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still in the dark, something lurking within the warehouse walls, waiting. Looking through the dust-covered windows, I saw a blurry figure reflecting from the dim light of the distant streetlights. My eyes could do nothing but focus on those strange images. Every sound from around me startled me, from the scratching of metal to the rustling of the dense weeds growing around me. I thought again of the question I'd asked myself many times before. What's really going on under the walls of this place? Was it my fear that made me imagine things? Or was there really an entity living and watching from the dark corners of this compound? In those quiet moments, I wondered if I should really continue searching for answers. But curiosity overcame reason, and I couldn't ignore the strange feelings that still followed me. Even though I tried to convince myself that it was all just an illusion created by stress and fatigue, I couldn't get rid of the feeling of insecurity, couldn't ignore the cold air and darkness that covered this place. Anyway, there's one thing I'm sure of. This story, these images, these sounds will never leave me. And perhaps there will never be an answer for what I went through. The forest has eyes. The road through the fog. Hello, I'm the storyteller. If you're listening to this story to find sleep, make sure you lock the doors, draw the curtains, and dim the lights. Because what you are about to hear is not just a story, but a warning from deep within the dark forest. I've never been the adventurous type, but when your life falls to pieces, when someone you love leaves you, when the work you devoted yourself to is taken away in a cold email, you start looking for something, anything to make you feel alive. For me, it's the Appalachian Trail, a vast wilderness stretching more than 2,000 miles through the mountains of the eastern United States. It promises solitude, tranquility, and the chance for a new beginning. I set out with a backpack, a pair of old boots, and a map. No phone, no GPS, just me and nature. The first day was a breath of fresh air, blowing away the heavy thoughts in my head. Every step seems to lighten the weight. I camped next to a small stream, sat next to a small fire, and heard the owls hoot in the night. There was something primal and safe in that darkness, as if the forest was embracing me. The second day passed peacefully. I met a few other climbers, nodded silently, and then parted ways, each going in a different direction. That's what I like. No questions asked, no one looking too deep. We're just people looking for something in the woods. On the third day, the sky became overcast. A thin layer of fog covered the trail. The trees around me seemed to be getting closer, quietly watching every step I took. I was used to the feeling of being watched, but this time, something was different. When I reached a small intersection where two trails met, I stopped to check my map. That's when I heard laughter, soft and fleeting at first, then getting louder and louder. I looked up, for people were approaching around the corner. 2 men, 2 women. They looked like the locals' jeans, flannel shirts, old boots. One of them whistled a familiar tune that I couldn't remember. The oldest man with salt and pepper hair and mischievous sparkling eyes spoke first. "Hey, walking alone?" I nodded. There was something about him that made me wary, but also made me feel comfortable. Warm southern accent, classic friendliness. My name is Ray. These are Mike, Sarah, and Lisa. He pointed to each of them in turn. Mike is tall and thoughtful. Sarah has blonde hair and a smile like sunshine. Lisa is petite with sharp eyes. They asked me a few simple questions. Where I came from, how long I had been out. I answered briefly, feeling the muscles in my face relax after 3 days of silence. Ray chuckled and leaned in, as if to share a secret. If you're looking for a really nice place, not on the map, we know of one. Not many people know about it, but the views are amazing. It's only a half-hour walk from here. I hesitated. Every instinct told me not to leave the trail with strangers, but they seemed friendly, and I was looking for something new. I smiled slightly. Sure, show me. We turned off the main road and entered the forest. At first it was a narrow path, then it became full of weeds. The trees are dense, the light gradually fades under the canopy. Sarah chatted happily next to me, telling local legends about strange plants. But I only half listened, because in my mind a small but resolute voice was ringing, "Come back." We walked another 10 minutes, then 10 more. No one said anything. No one smiled. I stopped. How much further? Ray turned around. His expression changed. The warmth disappeared, replaced by a cold, predatory look. Not far. Are you tired? I felt my stomach tighten. Something's wrong. Very wrong. Hunters in the dark. I forced a smile, but my palms were sweaty. I'm fine, I said, my voice hoarse. Just curious. No one answered. The silence became eerie around us, an eerie stillness enveloping the group that should have been leading. Sarah was no longer smiling. Mike remained silent as from the beginning, but now his face was as hard as stone. Lisa was getting too close to me, almost uncomfortable. I tried to turn around, pretending to readjust my backpack, but they had formed a narrow semicircle around me. Every time I moved, they followed, silently, resolutely. I realized I was surrounded. My heart was pounding. Cold sweat trickled down my forehead. The previously silent footsteps now sounded like the drumbeat of approaching death. Each row of trees overhead seemed to want to close, swallowing the last rays of light of the day. I think I'll go back, I said quickly, trying to sound casual. I don't think I can go any further. Ray laughed loudly, but this time it wasn't friendly at all. You'll want to see it. It's not far away now. I took a step back. Mike immediately blocked my path. Sorry, I said, and this time I couldn't hide my fear. I don't feel right. Sarah tilted her head, her voice as gentle as a deadly wind. You've gone too far to turn back. We're almost there. I quickly glanced around, looking for an opening, a chance to escape. But all directions are blocked. Did they set this up from the beginning? Careful, methodical. In a split second, I let go of reason and acted on pure instinct. I yelled, turning around and swinging my backpack at Ray's chest. He staggered backwards. I don't look back. I rushed between Lisa and Mike, tree branches whipping across my face, leaves rustling under my feet. Ray's scream echoed behind me like a wild animal. Don't let it escape. I ran, didn't stop, didn't look back. Everything is blurred. Branches scratched my skin. Roots made me stumble, but I got up immediately, panic pushing me forward with each step. After what seemed like an eternity, I discovered a huge tree had fallen, its roots torn from the ground, creating a hole big enough to crawl into. With no other choice, I squeezed inside, pressing my body against the cold, wet ground, leaves covering my face. Footsteps approaching. Where is she? I bit my lip, holding my breath. The flashlight beam flashed through the gaps in the tree roots. I was completely motionless. One word rang out in my head. Don't move. Don't move. Finally, the footsteps receded. I waited a few minutes, or maybe hours, I couldn't tell. Then I crawled out, covered in dirt, knees covered in blood. The sky was getting darker. I continued walking, following the dim light of the crescent moon. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get as far away from there as possible. And then, Like a miracle in the night, I saw the light. A small wooden house appeared through the trees. Smoke rises from the chimney. The window cast a soft yellow light into the forest. I stumbled towards it like a drowning person trying to find a lifeline. I knocked on the door 3 times.
Urgent.
After a while, the door opened. A man in his 60s, tall and thin, with gray hair and vacant eyes. He looked at me without surprise. No curiosity. Lost. I nodded, my voice barely above a whisper. Someone... they're chasing me. I don't know. He quietly opened the door wider. Please come in. The night forest is not good. I stepped inside, the door closing behind me. Knocking on the door at night. The house smelled musty, like pine, warm ash, and something I couldn't identify, earthy, dry and cold. A stone fireplace took up an entire wall, the fire still burning gently, creating flickering shadows as if whispering something in their language. The man didn't ask me any more questions. He gave me a dry towel and a thick wool blanket. I sat down in the old chair next to the fireplace, my hands still shaking, my eyes not leaving the door that was closed tightly behind me. My name is Jack, he said, his voice low and measured. I live here year-round. You're the first person I've met this week. I nodded, still unable to calm down. Thank you for saving me. I don't know who they are. They led me off the trail. Then you realize that not everyone with you is human, Jack interrupted, eyes fixed on the fire. I froze. What do you mean? Jack didn't answer right away. He stood up and poured me a cup of black tea from the kettle hanging over the fire. When he returned, he said again, there are people who live in the forest, or were once human, but then they became something else. Something that the darkness of the forest swallowed. They know how to hunt. They leave no trace. And they always smile. I shivered. I took a sip of tea, bitter, warm but not enough to dispel the cold inside. Outside, the wind whistled through the window. Tree branches scratched the wall like claws. Can I stay here tonight? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jack nodded. Of course, but remember, if you hear a knock on the door, don't answer it. Don't get up, no matter how many times you knock. I froze. Knock on the door? He didn't look at me. He just said, the forest has a way of testing people's hearts. He showed me a small room at the end of the hallway. It was simple, with a small wooden bed and an old mattress, a thick blanket and a small window overlooking the dark forest. I locked the door, pulled the curtains, pulled the blanket up to my chin, eyes wide open and looking up at the ceiling. I don't know when I fell asleep. Afterward, hit, 3 sharp sounds. I sat up, my heart almost stopped beating. The knocking sound came from the front door. I wasn't wrong. It's real. Hurry. I don't dare breathe. Don't dare move. A moment later, there were 3 more knocks. Hit. I heard Jack's voice from the living room, calm and measured. There's no one here. Go away. Silent. Afterward, hit. This time from the back of the cabin. I curled up in the blanket, my heart pounding like it was about to explode. I don't know how many times the knocking continued. From the front door, back door, windows, walls. It was as if dozens of hands were tapping every surface, trying to call me out. I pulled the blanket over my head. I closed my eyes. I gritted my teeth. I heard Jack. I don't answer. I didn't get up. Finally, in the confusion between waking and dreaming, I fell asleep. When I woke up, the sun had already risen. Light penetrated through the curtains, shining into the dusty room. I crept out of bed, listened. The cabin was silent. I walked to the living room. Jack was sitting by the fire, staring into space. On the table is a fresh, hot cup of tea. I looked outside. The ground is wet, and there are footprints. Dozens of small, bare footprints, led around the cabin. I didn't say anything. So does Jack. But I know I have to leave this place. The sooner the better. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. Hopefully this story has brought you thrilling and interesting moments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. See you in the next episodes.